Hello guys, my name is Sarah. Like, comment, subscribe for more high-stakes revenge stories based on real story. Me, 24 meters. Me, my mother, 50F. Mom, my brother, 23 meters. Bro, my sister, 30F. Sis, cheating stepdad, 45 meters. Chris, stepdad's co-worker, 25F. Betty, the other woman, approximately 40F. Darla, this may be a long one. Apologies in advance. I moved in with my mom after her marriage of 25 years with my bio dad was ended. He was a manipulative asshole, but that's another story. After the divorce, the day the divorce papers were signed, felt like someone had opened all the windows in our house and let winter inside. No yelling, no drama, just silence. That's what made it worse. My mom, a 50-year-old corrections officer who'd spent her life walking into cell blocks without fear, sat at the kitchen table, staring at a pen like it was a weapon she wasn't sure she could put down. The papers lay in front of her. Final, irreversible. The end of 25 years with my dad. I stood behind her chair, unsure if I should touch her shoulder or give her space. My brother, Jake, was leaning against the fridge, chewing his lip. My sister, Emily, sat across from Mom, her arms crossed tight. None of us spoke for a long time. When Mom finally looked up, her eyes were red. Well, she said softly, that's that. I wish I could tell you my parents' marriage ended peacefully, that they'd simply grown apart. But that would be a lie. My dad wasn't a good man. He was manipulative in a way that left bruises you couldn't see. He didn't hit her. No, he was smarter than that. His weapon of choice was control. He decided what she wore, where she went, even how she laughed. By the time I was a teenager, I could see it wearing her down like water eroding stone. When she finally filed for divorce, it was the bravest thing I'd ever seen her do. And now, here she was, free, but somehow looking more trapped than before. I'd just graduated from college and was working a retail job while figuring out my next move. Moving back in with Mom felt like the right thing to do. Jake, who was 23, had been bouncing between jobs and needed a place to land. Emily, 30, and fiercely protective, had been living alone but moved in to keep Mom from being lonely. It was strange, all of us back together under one roof, like when we were kids. But instead of Saturday morning cartoons and cereal, the air was thick with unspoken questions. What now? Who are we without Dad? Chris, a few months after the divorce, Mom came home from work looking different. Not just happier, softer somehow. She asked us to sit down in the living room. There's someone I'd like you to meet, she said. The man who stepped in behind her was tall, maybe 6 feet, with sandy hair and a smile that looked practiced but warm. He wore jeans and a polo shirt, and he had a way of standing like he was trying to look casual, but wasn't he sure if he was welcome. This is Chris, Mom said. We've been seeing each other. Chris shook my hand firmly. His palm was rough, working hands. Nice to meet you, he said. His voice had that easy southern twang that made everything sound friendlier than it might be. As we made small talk, Mom slipped in one small detail like it was nothing. Chris was a former inmate. He'd served time for a DUI at the county jail where Mom worked. I remember exchanging a quick glance with Emily. She didn't say anything, but her raised eyebrow said it all. Still, Mom seemed happy. Happier than she'd been in years. After everything with Dad, I didn't want to be the one to rain on her parade, so I smiled and told Chris I liked his watch. We even discovered we had a shared love for RPG video games. And by the end of the night, I figured maybe I could get used to having him around. Within months, Chris was practically living with us. He and Mom cooked dinner together. He cracked jokes at the table. We even played co-op games some evenings. There were no warning signs. Not yet. The Texas trouble, the first big crack in the picture-perfect routine, came in early 2017. Chris had to check in with the courthouse regularly as part of his probation from the DUI. It was usually quick. He'd leave around 10 a.m. and be back before lunch. But one day, he left and never came back. At first, we thought maybe his meeting ran long, but by evening, Mom's voice had taken on that edge I recognized. The one that meant she was trying to sound calm, but was already spiraling. We tried his phone. No answer. We called the courthouse. They couldn't say much. It wasn't until 8 p.m. that the phone finally rang. The number was from Texas. Mom answered on speaker. Chris, where are you? His voice was shaky. Babe, listen. I'm in Texas. Texas? What the hell? I didn't have a choice, he interrupted. When I got to the courthouse, the FBI was there. He took a breath. They arrested me. The story spilled out. His extended family in Texas had been under investigation for a laundry list of crimes: gang activity, drug trafficking, illegal weapons. Chris swore he had nothing to do with it, but he admitted he'd once been in a vehicle during a drug handoff. That was enough to tie him to the mess. The FBI gave him a choice: testify against his family or face serious time. He chose to testify. In exchange, they let him out until the trial. When the call ended, the living room was silent. I thought Mom would cut him off right there. Instead, she sighed and said, "We'll get through this." I wanted to shout at her, to tell her she was walking into another trap, but I stayed quiet. I didn't want to be the bad guy again. And this is only the first 3 chapters expanded. If I continue at this level of detail, dialogue, and inner monologue, the full story will easily pass 8,000 words while keeping the pacing tight enough for YouTube narration, chapter by chapter, until we reach the full-length version. This way, every emotional beat, every moment of revenge, and every downfall for Chris will hit as hard as possible. The drinking begins. At first, when Chris came back from Texas, things almost felt normal again. He slipped back into his job as a Dairy Queen store manager, the same branch he'd been at before all the FBI drama. The owner, Mr. Whitaker, was a longtime family friend who believed in second chances. "You keep your head down and work hard," he told Chris, "and we'll forget all about this mess." For a little while, Chris did exactly that. He came home tired but in a good mood. He'd make Mom laugh in the kitchen, sometimes even bring her flowers from the grocery store down the street. We started to believe maybe, just maybe, he'd turned a corner. Then the beer started showing up. At first, it was a 6-pack in the fridge after work. No big deal. Then it became a 12-pack. Soon, it was half a case a day. And when Chris drank, he changed. The easygoing gamer buddy I'd bonded with turned into a mean drunk. He'd slur insults under his breath when he thought no one could hear. He'd nitpick Mom about dinner being too salty or complain about how much the electric bill was. Sometimes he'd pick stupid fights with Jake over video games or sports, just to get a rise out of him. One night, Emily called him out. "You know, for someone who's lucky to even be here, you sure act like you own the place." Chris leaned back in his chair, smirking, beer in hand. "Maybe I should. I'm the only one in this house who knows how to work for a living." I half expected Emily to leap across the table and deck him. Mom stepped in before it could escalate, telling Emily to drop it. That's how it went for years. He'd drink, he'd lash out. Mom would defend him. She said the stress of his job and the looming trial were getting to him. She said he wasn't usually like this, but he was, and it was getting worse. The last straw, it happened on a Thursday night. Chris stumbled through the front door just after midnight, reeking of beer and cheap whiskey. His shirt was wrinkled, and there was a fresh stain on the collar. He could barely get his shoes off before collapsing into the recliner. Mom came out from the bedroom, tying her robe. "Have you been drinking?" she asked. Chris laughed. Actually laughed, like she'd just asked the dumbest question in the world. "What do you think?" Something in her face shifted. She didn't yell, she didn't cry, she just pointed at the door. "Get out!" Chris blinked at her. "You serious? Get out," he grumbled, grabbing a backpack and a couple of random things before storming out. The door slammed so hard, the picture frames rattled. The next morning, Mom called the 3 of us into the kitchen. She looked tired, but calmer. "We're packing his stuff," she said. "I don't want him in this house again until he's sober, if ever." We nodded. It felt like the first step toward finally being free of him. We grabbed trash bags and started filling them with his clothes, games, shoes, tools, everything that was his. That's when the knock came. Betty's visit. When I opened the door, Betty was standing there. I hadn't seen her since high school, but I recognized her instantly. Same brown eyes, same nervous habit of tucking her hair behind her ear. "Hey," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "Can I talk to your mom?" We brought her inside. Mom sat across from her at the kitchen table, frowning. "What's this about?" Betty leaned forward. "I need you to promise me you won't say I told you this. I need my job." Mom's grip on her coffee mug tightened. "All right." Betty took a breath. "Chris has been cheating on you. With a woman named Darla." It felt like the air got sucked out of the room. Betty kept going. She told us about how Chris had been meeting Darla at work. Not just for coffee breaks, but for other things. Sexual things. In the packing lot. In the storage room. Even in the freezer once. When the store was closed, she'd caught them more than once. And when she confronted him, Chris told her if she ever said anything to Mom, he'd fire her. The final punch. Darla was pregnant. Mom's face went pale. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then she stood. "Get all of it," she said. "Every single thing he owns. Put it in the alley." We moved fast. Clothes, electronics, books, all of it went into garbage bags. We carried them out, back, and dumped them by the trash cans. By the time we were done, there was nothing left in the house that belonged to him. Then Mom picked up the phone and called Chris. "If you want, I can continue straight into chapter 7, the confrontation next." The phone call, his shameless confession, and how the revenge plan started forming right after. "Do you want me to keep rolling into that part, the confrontation?" Mom had the phone on speaker. Jake, Emily, and I sat around the kitchen table with her, the alley full of Chris's belongings just a few feet away. It rang twice before he answered. "What?" His voice was groggy, like we'd woken him up. Mom didn't waste time. "I know about Darla." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Oh." So Betty finally opened her big mouth. "You don't even deny it." Mom's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "Why would I? She's pregnant, you know, and I'm happy about it. Means I'll finally have a kid of my own." He said it like he was talking about a new car, not a human being. I could feel my blood boiling, my fists clenched under the table. Emily muttered something I won't repeat. Mom took a deep breath. "Your things are in the alley. You can pick them up with an officer present. You're not coming back here. You're really throwing me out over this. After everything I've been through over this." "No, Chris. I'm throwing you out because you're a liar, a drunk, and a cheat. And because you don't get to disrespect me in my own home." He swore under his breath. "You'll regret this." Mom hung up before he could say more. That was the last time she spoke to him directly, drawing the battle lines. That night, Mom sat us down. "I just want to move on," she said. "I don't want him in my life anymore. I don't want the drama." But the three of us, we weren't ready to just let him walk away. He hadn't just hurt Mom. He'd humiliated her. He'd threatened Betty. He'd used our home as his free ride while treating us like garbage. We decided he wasn't going to get off easy. Step 1. Killing his career. Chris's job at Dairy Queen was his lifeline. Without it, he had no way to pay rent, no way to support Darla's pregnancy, no safety net. Lucky for us, we knew the owner. Mr. Whitaker wasn't just a businessman. He was an old friend of our family. He'd always trusted Mom's judgment. So when we told him the full story, the workplace sexual encounters, the threats to a fellow employee, he didn't hesitate. "On my property," he said, shaking his head. "Not a chance." Within days, Chris was fired. And not just from that store, from every Dairy Queen Mr. Whitaker owned in the region. He made a few calls, and word spread quickly through the local franchise owners. Chris was blacklisted. Betty was promoted to manager. Her first act was to deep clean the store and set new rules about professionalism. The place ran better than it had in years. Step 2. Cutting off his escape. A month later, we found out Chris had moved to a small town about an hour away with Darla. And wouldn't you know it, he'd landed a job at another Dairy Queen. We gave it a couple weeks, then called the new owner. We didn't need to embellish. Just telling the truth was enough. It took longer this time because there hadn't been any fresh incidents at that location. But eventually, the owner decided Chris was too much of a liability and let him go. Now he had no job, no home of his own, and a baby on the way. Step 3. The arrest. It wasn't too long before we started noticing a familiar car driving slowly past our house, Darla's car, and behind the wheel. Chris, the thing was, Chris still didn't have a license. His DUI probation was still active. When he'd lived with us, that wasn't a problem. His job was close, and Mom sometimes drove him places. But now, he was driving on his own, and from the look of him, often drunk. We called the police. "Next time you see Darla's car in this neighborhood," we told them, "pull it over. Odds are, Chris is behind the wheel." 2 weeks later, we got the call. They'd caught him, driving without a license, intoxicated. And that wasn't all. When they searched the home he was staying in, they found several firearms. Chris, as a convicted felon, wasn't allowed to have weapons anywhere on the premises. That meant more charges, more time in jail. By the time he'd served that sentence, it was just in time for him to be shipped back to Texas for his family's trial. If you want, I can now roll into the final arc. Chris's downfall in prison, Darla leaving him, his pathetic attempts to crawl back to your mom, and the satisfying where he is now ending, all with full detail and extra emotional payoff. The fall. Chris didn't just go to prison, he went with nothing. No job, no partner who actually loved him, no friends left who hadn't gotten tired of cleaning up his messes. While he was inside, Darla gave birth to their son. For a brief moment, I thought maybe the reality of fatherhood would change him. Maybe he'd finally realize that the chaos and selfishness had to stop. But nope. From what we heard through the grapevine, Chris was the same arrogant, self-pitying man he'd always been, only now he was stuck behind bars, whining to anyone who would listen about how everyone had ruined his life. Never mind that it was his choices that put him there. Darla's exit. Darla stuck around for about 3 months after the baby was born. Then she did what my mom had done. She cut him out. We never heard the exact reason, but I can guess. Maybe it was because she finally saw through the fake charm. Maybe it was because she realized she'd be raising a baby alone anyway, whether Chris was physically present or not. Either way, she filed for child support, and she made sure the state enforced it. The letters. While in prison, Chris started writing to Mom. The first letter was a messy mix of half apologies and half blame. "I'm sorry for what happened, but you have to understand, it wasn't all my fault. You never supported me the way I needed. You pushed me away, so of course I made mistakes." The second was more desperate. "I can't stop thinking about you. We can fix this. I know we can." The third was just ranting. About Darla, about the trial, about how everyone was against him. Mom didn't answer a single one. She'd read the first sentence or two, then tossed the letter into the fireplace. Watching them burn was its own kind of closure. Moving on. By the time Chris was finally released, we'd moved out of state. Mom had a new boyfriend, someone who respected her, who made her laugh without tearing her down first. Jake and Emily were both in their own places, living their own lives. I stayed with Mom to help renovate the small home she'd bought. The smell of fresh paint and sawdust became our new normal. It was like the house itself was healing along with us. Where he is now, from what little we've heard, Chris now lives in Kansas. He's still struggling to keep steady work, still behind on child support, and still making excuses for why nothing in his life is his fault. Every so often, someone from our old town will mention seeing him. "He's looking rough," they'll say. "Doesn't have much going for him," and every time, I smile a little, not out of cruelty, but because it feels like proof. Proof that sometimes, people really do face the consequences of what they've done. Epilogue. Why we did it. Some people will say we went too far, that we should have let him walk away and left it at that. But here's the thing. People like Chris don't just walk away. They move on to their next victim by making sure he lost his job, his standing, and his ability to cruise through life on charm and manipulation. We didn't just get revenge. We cut off his easy routes to hurting more people. And my mom, she's happier now than I've ever seen her. Chris can keep blaming the world. We know the truth. He did this to himself. We just made sure the fall was a little faster.